Welcome to another chapter of boring history, where survival meets untold struggles. In this episode, Part 29 Alone in the Wild, Girls' Survival Against a Giant Horned Python on the Island. We witness courage, instincts, and the raw fight for life in the harshest wilderness. Alone in the wilderness, a human being's mind experiences a series of subtle yet profound shifts. Isolation, by its very nature, strips away the familiar markers of society, the comforting routine of civilization, and the predictable rhythms of human interaction. For the girl on the island, each day began not with the casual assumption that someone else would be present, but with the stark reality that she was entirely responsible for her own survival. Her senses, which in the modern world are often dulled by constant distraction, became her primary tools, honed to detect minute variations in the environment, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of birds, the subtle change in wind direction. All of these carried significance. Streams continued to flow, the sun would rise and set according to its celestial rhythm, and predators operated entirely according to their own survival imperatives. This recognition forced her to develop a new mental framework. Every action, every choice had direct consequences, and hesitation could be fatal. The human brain, under such extreme conditions, begins to prioritize sensory input and motor responses over higher-order social reasoning, essentially rewiring itself toward immediate survival needs. Every moment alone brought with it the dual burden of acute awareness and existential contemplation. She became hyper-conscious of her own vulnerability. The realization that even a seemingly benign action, such as stepping on an uneven patch of ground, reaching for a fruit, or leaving a water source unattended, could trigger life-threatening consequences, instilled a careful deliberation in her every movement. Isolation magnified the perception of risk, turning the mundane into a landscape of potential hazards. At the same time, it nurtured an understanding of her own resilience. Her body responded in ways she had never consciously considered before. Heightened adrenaline surges that allowed her to run faster and react quicker, a sharpening of auditory and visual faculties that detected threats invisible to a distracted mind, and a growing sense of rhythm in her own actions that aligned with the environmental demands around her. Food and water, the most immediate necessities, became focal points of her survival strategy. In isolation, she could no longer rely on predictable schedules or communal knowledge. Every meal required both strategy and improvisation. She learned to identify edible plants and recognize signs of freshwater sources, but more importantly, she developed a keen intuition about timing and resource management. Her instincts guided her to avoid areas that might conceal predators while simultaneously maximizing the yield of foraging expeditions. Each success reinforced her confidence, while each failure provided lessons that, in hindsight, were invaluable. The isolation forced her to understand not just the physical environment, but her own capacities and limitations. How far she could walk in a day, how much energy she could expend before exhaustion became dangerous, and how to ration supplies without compromising immediate survival needs. Psychologically, isolation imposed an intense form of self-reliance. Without companionship or guidance, she was compelled to become both observer and participant, strategist and executor, philosopher and pragmatist. Her mind oscillated between periods of heightened alertness and moments of introspective reflection. In these reflective moments, she assessed her decisions, anticipating future threats and constructing mental simulations of possible scenarios. The ability to imagine danger before it materialized became a crucial survival mechanism. In the absence of social cues or external validation, her instincts became the internal compass that guided every decision. She learned to trust the subtle nudges of intuition, the sudden prickling at the back of the neck, the inexplicable sense that a location was unsafe, the tiny signals her body gave when fatigued or dehydrated, all of which were amplified by the isolation she endured. Moreover, isolation forced her to confront fear in its purest form. Fear, which in normal circumstances might be mitigated by the presence of others, or the reassurance of societal structure, became a constant companion. Yet it was not merely paralyzing. Over time, she learned to channel fear into vigilance and preparedness. The instinctive fight, or flight response, initially overwhelming and sporadic, gradually integrated into a systematic approach to survival. She learned to evaluate situations, with a combination of instinct and observation when to flee, when to remain hidden, and when to confront challenges directly. This balance between instinctive reaction and calculated strategy is the hallmark of human adaptability under extreme isolation. The daily routines she established were grounded in this interplay between instinct and observation. She woke with the sun, not out of habit but because her internal clock had synchronized with natural cycles, understanding that daylight was a critical window for foraging and safety. She organized her movements to minimize risk, navigating through dense underbrush, rocky terrain, and unpredictable weather patterns. Each night, she would seek shelter not merely for rest, but for protection against predators and the elements, assessing the stability, concealment, and accessibility of potential sites. These practices were reinforced by instinctive learning, where repeated exposure to the environment allowed her to anticipate and respond to threats with increasing efficiency. Her mind also began to notice patterns that were invisible in ordinary life. Seasonal shifts, migratory behaviors of birds, nesting patterns of reptiles, and even the subtle changes in plant life all became sources of actionable intelligence. The isolation amplified her ability to connect cause and effect, to predict environmental outcomes, and to integrate those predictions into her survival strategy. Instinct, often dismissed as a vague or mystical concept in the context of modern living, became a practical tool honed by observation, necessity, and repetition. She relied on it to navigate both immediate dangers and long-term survival challenges, turning what might have been a debilitating solitude into a crucible for cognitive and physical resilience. The moment she first sensed the presence of the giant horned python, the forest around her seemed to hold its breath. Even before she saw it, subtle signs hinted at its approach, the unusual silence among the smaller creatures, the faint vibration of the ground beneath her feet, and the rhythmic sway of foliage that did not correspond with the wind. Predators, especially those as formidable as a python of colossal size, do not announce themselves casually, yet the forest conveys their existence to those attuned to its language. For the girl, years of survival instincts and solitary observation converged at this moment. Her mind raced, cataloging the options available, while her body responded almost independently, muscles coiling with the readiness to react. The python's size was unlike anything she had encountered before. Its massive, muscular body blended seamlessly with the undergrowth, scales reflecting the dappled sunlight in an almost hypnotic pattern. She understood immediately that direct confrontation was not an option. The sheer strength of the creature made escape the primary strategy. Yet the python, unlike many predators, was not a mindless aggressor. It moved with intention, calculating energy expenditure, testing boundaries, and assessing her as it would assess any potential threat or prey. This understanding forced her to elevate her instincts from mere reflexive survival to a higher level of tactical reasoning, where anticipation became as crucial as speed or strength. Her heart rate surged, and adrenaline coursed through her veins, but the instinct to remain silent and observant dominated her actions. Any sudden movement could trigger the python's attack sequence, which relied on both stealth and the element of surprise. The forest, which had seemed vast and in different moments before, now became a complex matrix of potential escape routes, vantage points, and natural obstacles. She analyzed every branch, rock, and pool of water, constructing mental pathways that could maximize her chances of survival. Instinct and observation merged, guiding her decisions with precision that felt almost preternatural. The first physical encounter was not immediate, but inevitable. The python's head, triangular and marked by an almost geometric symmetry of scales, emerged gradually from the brush. Its tongue flicked outward, tasting the air in a manner that felt both alien and deeply primal. She knew that this small movement carried profound information. The python was aware of her presence, measuring chemical cues, assessing movement, and calculating whether to strike. In these moments, the girl's entire awareness centered on the subtleties of the predator's behavior. Every twitch, coil, and hiss became data points, feeding into an instinctive map of danger and potential response. As the python drew closer, the encounter shifted from observation to immediate survival action. She utilized the terrain to her advantage, positioning herself where large rocks and tree roots could serve as barriers, complicating the python's approach. Her instincts guided her to move in ways that minimized noise, using soft steps on moss and dry leaves to avoid alerting the creature further. In this tense interplay, her mind operated on multiple levels, monitoring the python's movement, anticipating its next action, and simultaneously calculating her own possibilities for evasion or defense. The isolation she had endured on the island had prepared her for such moments. The heightened sensory acuity developed over days and weeks allowed her to detect threats that would be invisible to an untrained observer. At one point, the python launched a sudden, swift strike. Though she was not within direct reach of its fangs or constricting coils, the motion itself conveyed the immense power and potential lethality of the creature. Her reaction was instantaneous. She leaped, twisted, and scrambled to a higher perch, using the natural topography to gain vertical advantage. This moment encapsulated the intersection of instinct and learned behavior, pure reflex combined with conscious strategy to preserve life. The python, momentarily thwarted, adjusted its position, eyes fixated, muscles tensing, ready to continue the pursuit or retreat depending on her next move. The psychological tension in such encounters is profound, every second magnified, every decision weighted with potential fatality. The encounter also illuminated the complexity of predator-prey dynamics in isolated ecosystems. The python was neither evil nor malevolent. It acted according to its biological imperatives. Its hunting techniques were the result of evolutionary refinement over millennia, a combination of stealth, strength, and patience. For the girl, understanding this framework was critical. She had to recognize the predator not as an abstract monster, but as an intelligent and adaptive being whose behavior could be predicted, to a degree, through observation and experience. This intellectual engagement with the predator was a survival tool in itself, allowing her to anticipate patterns, interpret subtle signals, and exploit opportunities for temporary safety. Time became elastic during the encounter. Seconds stretched interminably, each moment packed with potential danger. The python's movements were deliberate yet swift. Its muscular body allowed it to coil, strike, and constrict with efficiency that left no room for error. She relied on instinct honed over prolonged isolation, moving fluidly, using obstacles, and choosing paths that maximized the possibility of evasion. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow cast by branches, every scent carried by the wind became crucial information. Her mind catalogued and processed these sensory inputs with a precision that would have been unimaginable in the distractions of ordinary life. Survival in this moment required a combination of acute awareness, rapid reflexes, and a profound understanding of the predator's tendencies. Physical endurance also played a critical role. The python's presence forced her to sustain elevated levels of exertion over prolonged periods. Her muscles, previously conditioned by climbing, foraging, and daily survival activities, now operated at peak performance. Fatigue was a dangerous adversary. If she faltered, the consequences could be immediate. Hydration, previously a routine concern, became a factor in sustaining her energy and cognitive function. Every breath had to be controlled, every movement calculated, balancing the instinct to flee with the necessity to conserve energy. The encounter was not merely a battle of strength, but a test of endurance, strategy, and the integration of mind and body under extreme pressure. As the python shifted its approach, she experimented with subtle diversions, using environmental elements to distract or mislead the predator. Fallen logs, scattered leaves, and even reflections of light off wet rocks became tools in her survival repertoire. Her actions were guided by a combination of instinctive knowledge and creative problem-solving, a testament to the adaptability of humans in the face of immediate danger. Each maneuver required precision. Misjudgment could allow the python to close the distance, bringing its lethal strength into play. Her mind oscillated between fear, calculation, and instinctual response, forming a continuous feedback loop that dictated survival strategy moment by moment. The girl's journey toward resilience on the hostile island was neither immediate nor simple. Each day presented challenges that tested the limits of her physical and mental capacities, forcing her to adapt in ways that would have seemed impossible in a more structured environment. Resilience, in this context, was not a singular act of bravery or a single moment of triumph. It was the cumulative effect of countless decisions, countless small victories, and countless failures that, together, formed the foundation for her continued survival. The island, vast and indifferent, provided no assistance. Every step required effort, every resource required discovery, and every encounter demanded caution. It was in this relentless environment that the true nature of human endurance revealed itself. From the earliest days of isolation, she had to confront the stark reality of scarcity. Food was not abundant, and water sources were often unreliable or difficult to access. The process of locating sustenance became an exercise in observation, trial, and error. She learned to identify edible plants and fruits, distinguish between safe and dangerous routes, and understand the behavior of the island's animal inhabitants, whose patterns indicated potential food or peril. With each successful foraging expedition, her confidence grew, reinforcing a sense of agency that is central to resilience. Each failure, such as misidentifying a plant or disturbing a nest of aggressive creatures, was equally instructive, shaping her understanding of the environment and honing her instincts. Resilience, in this sense, was forged in the interplay between success and error, in the ongoing negotiation with an unforgiving natural world. The physical demands of the island were matched by psychological challenges. Isolation magnified every thought, every fear, and every doubt. She was forced to reconcile with the absence of human contact, confronting both loneliness and the anxiety that accompanies prolonged solitude. Yet over time, she discovered that resilience was as much a mental construct as it was a physical necessity. Her ability to endure hardship relied on structuring her days, establishing routines, and finding purpose in small, achievable goals. Gathering firewood, constructing makeshift shelters, and creating safe sleeping spaces were not merely practical activities. They were acts that reaffirmed her capability and fostered a sense of control in an otherwise unpredictable environment. This mental framework allowed her to approach challenges methodically, reducing panic and fostering strategic thinking. Encounters with predators, both large and small, continued to shape her understanding of resilience. She realized that survival required not only avoidance, but also anticipation and adaptability. Each confrontation, whether a fleeting encounter with venomous snakes, birds of prey, or the occasional wild mammal, demanded quick assessment and action. Her resilience manifested in her ability to remain composed under threat, to analyze risk objectively, and to implement protective measures effectively. The lessons learned from these encounters were cumulative. Understanding the terrain, the behavior of wildlife, and the subtle environmental cues became essential tools in her survival toolkit. With each passing day, the gap between instinct and deliberate strategy narrowed, reflecting the maturation of her resilience in the crucible of isolation. Environmental mastery became a hallmark of her triumph. The island, initially an overwhelming expanse of forest, cliffs, and water, gradually transformed into a space she could navigate with confidence. She memorized trails, identified landmarks, and developed an internal map that guided her movements. This spatial awareness was crucial, not merely for efficiency but for safety. Knowing where to find fresh water, edible plants, and secure resting spots was a matter of life and death. Her physical coordination improved as well. Climbing, balancing, and traversing difficult terrain became second nature. Each successful navigation reinforced her belief in her own capabilities, a psychological reinforcement that bolstered resilience as much as practical skills did. The triumph lay not in conquering the island, for it remained wild and untamed, but in harmonizing with it, learning its rhythms, and using its resources judiciously. Adversity continued in the form of weather, a constant and unpredictable force on the island. Torrential rain, searing sun, and sudden temperature shifts tested her endurance and problem-solving skills. She learned to anticipate changes, to seek or create shelter, and to adjust her routines accordingly. Fire became a critical tool, not only for warmth and cooking but also as a psychological anchor in moments of isolation. The process of maintaining fire under challenging conditions required persistence, patience, and ingenuity. The ability to endure adverse conditions without succumbing to despair exemplified her growing resilience. Each storm weathered and each day survived reinforced a sense of continuity and self-reliance that was essential for long-term survival. Social and emotional resilience was also cultivated through a unique relationship with the island itself. Though physically alone, she developed a profound attunement to her surroundings. She recognized patterns in the behavior of animals, learned to anticipate natural events, and interpreted environmental signals with remarkable acuity. This attunement was both practical and psychological. It provided guidance for action and a sense of connection to the living world around her. The mental discipline required to maintain awareness, plan strategically, and act decisively fostered a form of cognitive resilience that paralleled her physical endurance. She learned to balance fear with curiosity, caution with initiative, and observation with intervention, all of which reinforced her capacity to thrive despite the absence of human companionship. Her triumph was not characterized by dramatic heroics, but by incremental mastery of her environment. She discovered innovative ways to secure food, create tools, and construct shelter using natural materials. Each innovation was a testament to adaptability, reflecting the ability to transform limited resources into functional solutions. For example, she learned to use vines as makeshift ropes, leaves as insulation or bedding, and stones for cutting or digging. The combination of creativity, observation, and skill allowed her to overcome limitations imposed by the island's harsh conditions. This ongoing problem solving became a central aspect of her resilience, reinforcing the understanding that survival was an active, engaged process rather than a passive endurance of circumstance. Physical recovery and health maintenance were additional components of her survival strategy. Injuries, minor illnesses, and fatigue presented constant threats in an environment where medical assistance was non-existent. She developed methods to tend wounds, purify water, and preserve energy, often improvising with the materials at hand. Her awareness of the body's signals, pain, hunger, exhaustion, became acute, allowing her to respond proactively rather than reactively. Resilience, in this context, was a dynamic interplay between action, reflection, and adaptation. She understood that her body and mind were interdependent instruments of survival, each requiring care and attention in order to function optimally.